O dabar išpildom 3 karaliaus norus. Prenumeruojam, sekam ir spaudžiam patinka.
Lauren Severn, the 9 to 5 work week sucks. Man atrodo, visi pritarė, kad nuo 9 iki 5 tas standart darbo valandos yra tiesiog šūdas. Ir kiek aš žinau, kai kuriuose pasaulio vietose jau eksperimentuoja ir gal mažesnės valandas arba mažiau dienų dirbti. Kiek aš žinau ir kiek ten, I guess, mačiau ir girdėjau atgarsių, kad tie eksperimentai, tai yra, kur daro tos eksperimentus su trumpesnė darbo savaitė ir panašiai, rezultatai labai yra geri ir žmonės palaiko ir panašiai. Tai aš žinau, čia jinai apie tai šnekės, būtų keista, kad jinai apie tai šnekėtų, nes, republikonėgės Amerikos. Bet, yeah, go.
Okie dokie. This is about to be a very spicy take for a conservative. As you all know, conservatives love working. In fact, we are the party of jobs. We're the party of work. We are the party of pull yourself up by your gosh darn bootstraps, you lazy hippie communist, and get to the coal mines if you want to eat. I consider myself a conservative, even if others don't, and I fully reject this approach, certainly in this modern economy. And I'm tired of seeing conservatives ceding so much ground to the left when it comes to social perception of which party stands with and understands the average worker. Because right now, it feels like no one does.
Aš tikrai negaliu suprasti average worker kaip bedarbis. Kiek žmonių dirbot? Tas standartinės valandas, tipo, nuo 9 iki 5, nuo ten 8 iki 4, whatever, tipo. Turėtų būti, kaip pasiūminu, didžioji dauguma žmonių. Nors, blėt, aš čia klausiu Twitch'o chat'e. Bet vakare dabar streaminu. Jo, jeigu klausiu ryte, kai streaminu, tai turbūt būtų biased atsakymai. Bet dabar turbūt aš asiūminu, kad jūs visi turėtumėte dirbti. Gal ne visi, bet didžioji dauguma turėtų dirbti standartinių valandų darbą, nes dabar jau 8 valandos ir jūs žiūri šitą streamą, tai greičiausiai, kaip ir sakot, po darbų grįžtant. Okay.
But before we get into all of this, I wanted to give a massive thank you to today's sponsor, Private Internet Access VPN.
Mes nežiūrėsim tavo reklamos, sorry, Lauren.
Or state from on when you prevent access today. Tradition is what makes a conservative a conservative. The left, the liberals, they demand to change society to fit their own ends by whatever means necessary. Even radical free market capitalists are really not conservative by this metric, which begs the question, as conservatives, what traditions are we supposed to preserve? Many of my fellow conservatives look back to the 50s as their shining example of what life and civilization ought to look like. And to be sure, there are things to love there. Things we wish we could have preserved.
Čia vienas argumentas, kur man niekad nedaėjo, ten ir iš tų visų nacių visokių, ten daromi argumentai ir iš tų konservatyvių Amerikos, I guess, tų jau labai žmonių. Grinai žiūri ten 40-uosius, 50-uosius, 60-uosius metus, tarsi tai buvo kažkoks žmonijos gyvenimo toks pavyzdys, kad iš ten reikia semtis, kaip ten gerai buvo. Toks, what the fuck, no? Aš nenoriu tokiam laikė gyventi, kur nei ten technologijos nebuvo, ten viskas šudiniau buvo. Tipo, galim gal ginčyti, gal kai kurie dalykai geriau buvo, bet aš dabar nesugalvočiau, bet realiai viskas dabar žmonijoje atrodo geriau yra. Kokio šūdo norėčiau dabar, kad būtų kaip kad tenais, kad buvo. Ten apie dalykus kaip healthcare, tai yra mental health, iš vis niekas ten nešnekėjo. Ten kas antras irgi, ypač ten Lietuvoje ir kur nors ten priespaudai gyvena arba prasigėręs. What the fuck? Anyway. Žmonės tikrai negyveno geriau tais laikais. Kai kada vergovė buvo iš vis? Slavery, kai kada? When was slavery abolished in the USA, pavyzdžiui? Nes aš biškai seniau negu galvojau,
We were starting to slip down the batshit insane slide to clown world that we are on today. So sure, turn back the clock to the 50s, but you'll only enjoy it for about 10 years until we enter the 60s, 70s, 80s, and eventually repeat the whole damn cycle until dogs are getting monkeypox and children are transgender. And it's worthwhile looking at the hints we could have seen that led us in this direction. The trickle of social change that started in the 20th century became a flood after the Second World War. What used to be a community, larger families, and wider society working together to...
Jo, atrodo žiauriai geras gyvenimas. Let's go to the coal mine and work forever. Bus tai bis. Jesus.
Raise children as a unit ended up a little more rigid with the nuclear family. To be sure, the family unit is a good thing, but women being stuck at home with materialism on the rise, focus on appearance, hair curlers, and Valium, it wasn't exactly ideal. The left liked to make it sound like every housewife in this era was a miserable slave, and I don't believe that for a second. But it is true that many women were becoming struck with feelings of isolation in suburbia, with benzodiazepine addiction becoming far more common, especially among housewives. Even the Rolling Stones wrote about it in some of their songs.
Oh, mother's little helper. Oh, man. Oh, man.
Mommy's Little Helper, pointing to the fact that even in the 50s, that slow drift away from larger communities, living amongst extended family, etc., to focus on smaller and smaller circles, which eventually just became the individual, did begin to have its consequences to some degree. And I'm not suggesting this is any fault of conservative ideology, it just sort of happened naturally. And even more so today, that being less involved with extended family, grandparents, etc., moving away for work or cheaper housing, and only prioritizing your immediate family, this all just became more normalized over time. Now, despite this nitpick, the 50s were still pretty damn good. The middle class absolutely thrived in the middle of the 20th century, earnings soared, housing was cheap, and opportunities were ripe for the taking of any capable man. But under the surface, for men as well, hints of a societal trouble were brewing. How did a man provide for his family?
By
leaving the home
working.
for the day and working.
All
Let's wind
day.
back the clock a little further. At the start of the century, people began getting excited about this new concept that was coined the Protestant work ethic. In order to be moral, in order to be an upstanding citizen, you had to work hard and earn your keep in society. And apparently some people took this really damn seriously, or at least their employers did, because
Aš toks
people were working
bevertis
like 10 to
vals-
12-hour
society,
workdays at a
kaip
time
čia
in the
sako.
early 1900s. Until
Aišku, negalima
1938,
taip
when
sakyti.
Roosevelt passed a law implementing the
Pagal jų
40-hour
standartus.
work week as an absolute maximum for businesses, otherwise they had to pay overtime. Of course, in classic fashion, people pushed things straight to the legal limit and made sure to create the 9-to-5 work week, in which companies could take full advantage of that 40 hours before they'd be forced to pay people more. So the standard became one must now instead work for an 8-hour day every day, except for time off at the weekend. And that's how you would demonstrate your worth as a functioning human being. For 8 hours, under the Protestant work ethic attitude, the more productive you are at the office, the greater a person you are. Go capitalism. And you know what? It worked, at least for a while. When America really took charge on the world stage, the average full-time employed man could very easily buy a house, support his family, and enjoy life without much worry about what he had in the bank. So even if you dreaded what you were doing from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, at the very least, you felt rewarded for all your hard work. And, you know, hell, it wasn't as long as...
Nu. Jo. Kodėl taip yra? Bet pala. Jo, man atrodo, tada gal pas jos nėra tokios Bet ką aš žinau? I don't know.
Your grandparents had to work, right? As time has gone on, this has changed drastically though. However, the attitude of many establishment conservatives towards the economic system seems to have not changed with that. While leftists will put forward their complaints about work culture in often immature and hyperbolic ways, it can sometimes feel like anyone who dares question, slaving away in a soulless corporate environment is branded a communist by some figures on the right. Because how is society supposed to function without the coffee, the meetings, and the executives in cubicles cubicles, right? The Zoomers, on the other hand, have reacted not so well to their parents' and grandparents' views on work, and they have become completely disenfranchised with working, so angry and so bitter towards societal expectations to get a job, so utterly uninterested in joining the system, that many of them barely last a few weeks at a new job and seem to have no respect for showing up on time or doing general duties at all. And for those who do stay at work, the new trend is quiet quitting, refusing to put any more than the bare minimum of effort into work possible. And while normally I would relentlessly mock this sort of lazy progressive thought and action, or lack thereof, the more I observe and listen to young people in the workforce, the more I understand their apathy. And I think conservatives are missing out on a big opportunity here to show that they understand these people and have better solutions to the societal crisis they're facing than reviving old failed ideologies that killed millions. It's not good enough to just tell younger generations, you have to work or you'll die. This isn't a utopia, bucko. That much is obvious. What people want to hear is, you need to work, but work doesn't need to look like this. And what do I mean by this? What happened to our economy and work culture since the great boom in the 1950s? 1. The 9-to-5 can no longer support a family. Even on an average or above average wage, median annual household income is below living wage. 2. The 9-to-5 no longer has anything to do with your community. You used to spend 8 hours building up the people around you, improving the business of your neighbor, interacting with the people you love, and making your life better, and working with your friends, people who live in your area. This is no longer the case. Most people work for multinational corporations whose owners they will never even know the name of, and whose coworkers they'll often never even meet. Of course, this isn't the case for every individual, but it is becoming more and more common as small businesses are completely wiped off the map by bad government policy. 3. The 9-to-5 used to...
Wait, bad government policy ar tiesiog kapitalizmas? Čia man įdomu būtų, ką protingesnis žmonės pasakytų bad government policy, tai sunaikina mažus biznes, o ką jie turėjo padaryti, kad jie išsilaikytų. Jie negali išsilaikyti tiesiog. Economy of scale tiesiog arba tu pastoviai turėsi naštą tų small business ir valstybė tarsi į minusais, kad išlaikytų tos small businessus, kaip aš suprantu, arba, kaip bazinių lygio, arba jie bus privesti žlugti under capitalism. There's no way. Ne? I don't know.
To have some purpose. For many, it no longer does. Far too many people are working what I like to call bullshit jobs that serve absolutely no purpose other than to have somebody employed. It's been a common trope for years now that many people have no idea what their job even entails.
Wow, busy schedule. What do you do?
Then home again for 2 days, then back to bloody New York again.
What do you do for a living?
I don't know.
You must know what job you do.
No, I have literally no idea. I travel all over the place and have meetings with other men who look very like me, and we josh about golf handicaps and, the wives' breasts, but I really don't know why. See that? Christ alone knows what that's all about.
At 17, my local government initiated a jobs creation campaign, which I was hired under, where I had to...
Kartais tikrai atrodo, kai kurie žmonės ten mūsų startupė ten buvo, kai kurios pozicijos atrodė antiek useless, antiek shit, kad what the fuck, kam iš vis mes samdom, tipo, kam jūs samdotės ir kam to reikia. Bet kai, tada gal paaiškėja dalinai, kad gal gali matyti, kad gal, reikia, bet čia labai toks trečias būna. Ir kai kurie, aišku, netikėtinai reikalingi. Bet galų gale, nežinau, startupas ar gera vieta teisti, nes startupai šiaip, man atrodo, 9% startupų tiesiog pinigų degintojai yra. Nes ten, tu investicijas gauni ir Jesus Christ, ant kiek neoptimaliai ir tragiškai pinigai būna paskirstomi, kad tiesiog LEC finalas Fnatic prieš G2 mes dar nežinom, bet gali būt. Loterija, ką tu prašai. Nes mes tik rytoj sužinosim, kas žais finale. Kol kas mes dar nežinom. Raugai prieš fanatikus dar pirmą turėsiu žaisti. Anyway, toliau žiūrim.
Click the elevator buttons in an event center. There were only 3 floors, and the elevator
pas
lights went
startupus,
off
jo.
after 5 minutes of no use. So
Tipo,
I
tu gali turėti labai gerą idėją ir labai gerą planą, bet tiesiog vienas žmogus gal nesupras, kaip reikia įgyvendinti, ten kiti, tipo, tiek daug dalykų yra, gali būti, tie blogi, kad tipo startupas nepavyktų arba tos vizijos negyventų, nėra neįtikėtina. Ir tas, kuris turi labai aiškę viziją, ką nori ir kaip nori, jeigu tokią turi padaryti net, klausimas, ar jis galės tai gyvendinti, nes galų galę turės pasamdyti žmonės, labai aiškiai apibūdinti visiems, ką daryti ir belinkiek turėtų micromanaging. Aš galvoju tik iš savo startupo, tarkim, apie tą appą. Bet, tipo, tai yra tiek daug lygiais disconnected nuo to, pavyzdžiui. Nes tas žmogus, kuris mokamai ją padarė gerai, tipo, pavyzdžiui, ten Dota ir panašiai. Aš suprantu, kad gal iš Dotos perspektyvos jis supranta, bet tada mes darėm ir LOLą. Ir jisai ten jau 0 clue. 0 fucking clue. Ir jie pasamdo mane, kur aš suplanuoju tą visą, bet tada aš turiu perpasakoti ten, ir programuotojams ir visko, bet galų gale ne mano sprendimas, kurį funkcionalumą darysim. Aš galiu tik patarimus dalinti ir realiai tiek daug dalykų aš būčiau kitaip daręs. Aš tikrai tikiu, kad taip kaip aš įsivaizdavau tą appą, jeigu mes jį būtumėm padarę, būtų vienas geriausių appų rinkoje, jeigu ne geriausias appas rinkoje. Bet tų feature taip ir nepadarėm, niekur nedadarėm ir jis niekad nebuvo toks, koks, tipo, aš būčiau norėjęs, kad jis būtų, jeigu, tipo, aš turėčiau galimybę. Bet, jo, ir aš dabar netaip senai pamačiau porą features, kur tie naujesni, kur tie appai dabar kur turi, tik dabar pamačiau, apie kuriuos aš galvojau prieš 2-3 metus apie tos feature, dabar kai kurie jos padarė ten ir panašiai, bet ir jeigu tu pasamdysi netgi žaidėjus, kurie, pavyzdžiui, to LOL'o nežaidė, nes aš vienintelis žaidžiau LOL'o. Netgi programuotojai, visi kiti, tipo, programuotojai gal biškai kitaip, jie tu ką liepsi tą padarys, bet jie vis tiek, žinai, jeigu jie supras, ką tu nori padaryti ir kodėl tas feature svarbu LOL'e, pavyzdžiui, jie tada biškai kitaip tą patį funkcionalumą padarys gal, kuris tada būtų lengviau išplečiamas ar panašiai. Tipo, anyway. Žodžiu. Gerai.
basically just sat in the dark for hours to get paid. Thankfully, I didn't lose my mind, or I did, depending who you ask. 4. Outside of things like cashier positions, which require necessary manning for a period of time, the 9-to-5 concept is not really based on merit of work or output of work, but having you bend your knee to whatever corporation or entity is employing you for a set period of time. I'll admit this is more common in government or government-funded jobs, but those are like a quarter of jobs in many countries. I personally worked a student union job where I would finish my tasks in like 2 hours and have to sit around looking busy for the next 6, and observed literally all my coworkers doing the exact same thing. This incentivizes unproductive behavior, because why—
Tas man irgi buvo vienas durniausių dalykų, kokius aš esu matęs. Nu, aš neturėjau nieko tokio darbo, bet tipo aš vieną kartą į ofisą nuvaręs buvau, kai man reikėjo sutartį pasirašyti ir aš nuvariau į Vilnių į ofisą, jie kur ten turėjo ir visą dieną aš ten praleidau realiai. Ir I couldn't do it. I actually couldn't fucking do it. Tipo, duoda užduotį ir tu turi padaryti užduotį. Ir tu ją padarai laisvas. Iki kol duos kitą užduotį. Bet visi tarsi tokią idėją turi, kad gerai, kad tu padarysi užduotį ir tada tu darysi kažką kitko. Tipo, kažkokią naują tau užduotį sugalvos. Tai tu nebūsi skatinamas atlikti užduoties kuo greičiau. Nes visą laiką bus antra, tai kam tau atlikti kuo greičiau užduotį. Ir šiaip tie startupai. Jeigu tu turėtum jeigu darbuotojai turi, pavyzdžiui, procentą kažkokį įmonės, aš įtariu, kad jie suinteresuoti yra, kad produktą kuo geresnį padaryti. Bet nieks neturi to procento. Visi dirba už tą patį atlyginimą, tai jiems pochoje, ar tas projektas pasiseks ar ne. Taip irgi biškai kitaip žiūrisi, bet jo, aš dirbau pusę etato, nu, tipo, tam savo darbį ir aš iš namų dirbu. Ir realiai ten reikdavo kažką padaryti ir, nu, nieks nežino iš tikrųjų, tau nereikia, kaip jinai pasakė, pasiminėti, kad dirbi, žinai, padaręs kažką, ar panašiai, nu, I don't know, kažkaip kitaip irgi. Lievas startupas, jeigu optionų neduoda, kad beveik jokie startupai optionų neduoda jokiem darbuotojam išskyrus patiem viršūnėm.
Why bother finishing your task?
Ar ne? Visi duoda? Aš kiek žinau, jokie startupai neduoda. Ai, dabartinį, tai pasakėjai. Nes ten, nu, programuotojai, ten darbuotojai keitės kas 2 savaitės ten, tai visiems option duos, aišku, ne. Tai tipo, čia esminiam gal žmonėm, kai kurie dabar duoda, arba tiem, nu, įkūrėjim kažkaip, I don't know. Nes, nu, net nelogiška būtų, kiek tenais vien darbuotojų pasikeitė. Tai realiai aš ką ir sakiau, galbūt tie, kur pradininkai būna. Ir paėmė Facebooką. Man, vat, įdomu, paėmam random startupą, kuris Kaune atsidarė, žinai, ir jie darys dabar su 3 darbuotojais. Jo, jie turės options, nes tie 3 darbuotojai yra visi įkūrėjai turbūt. Bet jeigu paimsim startupą, kaip kad mūsų kad buvo. Kuriam apą. Ten, nežinau, kiek žmonių buvo savininkai, kokie 5, žinai, gal ten bendrai sudėjus. Ir ten keletas project manager visokių, žinai, ir paskui visi kiti tiesiog programuotojai, darbuotojai, gal kokie 5 žmonės svarbus, kurie pirmai įsidarbino, ir paskui koks 50 žmonių buvo, kurių keitėsi kas porą savaičių ten. Tikrai jiems niekas option neduos už nu, tipo, what the fuck, čia net nelogiška būtų. Tai, aš tikrai nemanau, kad dauguma duoda startupo, ar tuo labiau, kad pačiai visi duoda. Čia priklausys ir nuo pačio startupo, nes tu paminėjai net ne startupo Facebooką vapšė, bet ir nuo startupo turbūt priklausys, ir nuo to, kada tu atėjai, ir turbūt koks tu svarbus. Tai sakau, tai taip gausis, kad ten gal 1% tų startupuose dirbančių žmonių actually gaus optionus, kurie nebuvo tiesiogiai įkūrėjai to startupo, tipo, anyway.
Tasks early and getting ahead if you're just gonna get paid the exact same to bumble and dawdle about all day and finish by 5. Next, the 9-to-5 used to have upward mobility. It often no longer does. The only upward mobility is for those who hold degrees, not those who work well within a company. And anyone who has to work from 9 to 5 to live often does not have the time to acquire the degrees necessary for upward mobility that someone in a more privileged position with trust funds, university payments from the bank of daddy, and a free apartment can, even if they're not as well versed in said actual job. You used to hear about men working their way from the mailroom of a corporation to CEO. That kind of stuff will never happen again. This means that people working on the lower end of 9-to-5 jobs are now often managed by people who have absolutely no conception of what it is like to work the jobs they're managing, leading to a massive disconnect and bitterness between upper management and average workers. 6. The 9-to-5 used to allow people to have savings. Now the average salary of a 9-to-5 worker barely allows them to get by from paycheck to paycheck. 7. The 9-to-5, or at least some of them, used to be fun. A lot of jobs used to have at least a bit of freedom within them, right? People used to be able to make jokes. People used to get hired for their competency. Now, with mass creation of HR departments, making a joke could mean the end of your job. Just being born damn white these days probably means your upward mobility in a company is completely shot. The creation of mass HR departments was the death of company camaraderie.
I'm a recruiter. It's a small industry. Smaller than you'd think. Same with HR. So, if you're looking for a job, or maybe trying to keep a job, maybe, just...
Ar jūs irgi visi jos nekenčiat dabar? Iš karto, aš net nežinau, kas jinai, ką jinai pasakys, aš nekenčiu jos. Iš jos vien iš jos veido išraiškų ir kalbėjimo manieros, aš visiškai nekenčiu jos. Fuck you.
Maybe.
Shut the fuck up.
About what you're putting on social media.
Okay.
Again,
Dabar, kai išgirdau, ką pasakė, aš dar labiau jos nekenčiu, gerai. Dėk pragarena.
I know you're not really big with stats and, you know, facts aren't your thing, you know? But what I can tell you
Lažinskos vardas Karen.
Is that recruiters talk. And recruiters, like the majority of Canada, don't agree with you. Do you know what that means? Do you have any guesses? Any guesses what that means?
You suck.
What that means is that if you need a job, you might not get one.
Fuck
If you
you.
want to keep a job, you might not get to do that. Then what do? We terminate you. With cause. If we're so lucky. If not, we give you the minimum allowed by law. Either way, best of luck to you. Recruiters are watching. HR is watching. Everywhere. And we hate you. We hate you so much. And you think we can't do anything. But we can.
I don't know, Hitler блядь.
Have the power. Always. Remember that. My heart goes out to you guys. I mean, you have families to
I don't know,
feed, right?
šetonas,
You brought your
na.
kids to this big event. You're freedom fighters. You're standing up. Oh, they will be so
She keeps
proud.
going.
So proud of you. Fuck yourself. Fuck yourself. Mwah.
Next, our countries have mass
Okay,
produced
then.
people with degrees and made it so that your salary is tied to said degrees, which means high-paying jobs are massively oversaturated, while the
Labas,
only
netyčia.
available jobs en masse are low-paying minimum wage jobs, with a large portion of the populace being way overqualified for them. The amount of Uber drivers with degrees and even masters that you'll meet is getting comical.
9.
Mass immigration has inflated housing
Oh,
prices
God.
and crushed wage growth, meaning you're no longer competing with just your neighbor for a job, but competing with the smartest applicant from overseas who can be potentially paid less and result in some sort of diversity quota discount for a company.
10.
The only way to move up in a company, or to be recognized, or sometimes just stay aboard in general, is to take your work home with you and essentially make it your entire life. It's become a bit of a joke online, but it's not really at all, that people will say, I didn't want to work a 9 to 5, so I decided to start working for myself, and now I work 24/7. And the 9 to 5 is not only
Benislavas, matau, sutiko pakalbėti, pagrasinau visą jo šeimą, žinai, ir sutiko, neturėjo pasirinkimo.
defended, but the 24/7 work ethic is defended even more by conservatives. And as a result, these people have no time to spend with their families, no time to give to their communities. Even if they're clocking out right at 5, most people's commutes home are a hellish nightmare with cities being overcrowded. They leave home at 7 a.m., they get home at 6, and by that time they're exhausted and need sleep. They'd better not sleep in and show up 5 minutes late for work at their mega corporation, or they'll be fired. Human beings are simply numbers on a check sheet to these megacorps, so, you know, God forbid you're a couple minutes late because you were ill, doesn't matter, you're written up and bye-bye. You weren't a human to us in the first place. You know,
Pala, šitą.
so
You might be committing time clock fraud. Ai, jie turi tą, čia kur, tipo, ateini ir įsiklokini, tipo, nu, kad dirb pradedi, tipo. The time clock fraud occurs whenever an employee does something while punched in that is unrelated to work, while not on a 15-minute break. Here are some easy-to-do tips to avoid committing time clock fraud. Use the restroom before you start work and before coming back from meals. Make sure to take off your coat, jacket, or other outwear pieces before punching in. Oh, God. Arrive early to ensure you have the time to complete any shopping or other tasks before your scheduled start time. Once punched in, you are on the clock and should immediately grab your equipment and head to the sales floor. If 10 employees commit 10 minutes of time clock fraud a day, that's 100 minutes a day. That's 3,000 minutes a month, which equals 50 hours of payroll lost. So, literally, tu esi tiesiog nežmogus to korporacijo akysi, nu, tokias taisyklės, kaip parašo. Tu turi tas minutės mums dirbti ir tik dirbti. Ir nepadirbsi bent vieną minutę, nu, pizda tau yra. Tu mums kainuoji pinigų, žiūrkė. Jesus.
you know, God forbid you're a couple minutes late because you were ill, doesn't matter, you're written up.
Bet koks aš privilegijuotas ir man neteko dirbti to kažkokiai korporacijai to tokio darbo. Aš visiškai nepajėgus būčiau tą daryti, Jesus. Fuck. Šiaip radau straipsnį neblogą apie startupų stock optionus. Lietuvoje kai kurie bando daryti iškreiptą startupų įvaizdį, bet dabartiniams specialistui sunku būtų, manau, be optionų prisviliuoti. Ok, pažiūrim. Beginner's Guide. Taivo pungas. What equity offers and contracts look like. Aš įjungsiu, kad matytųsi viskas ir jums. Stock employment offers equals the base salary plus stock options. Nežinau, kas čia per svetainė, by the way, bet skamba labai sketchy. Are stock in company that you haven't paid for yet, but have the option to buy out exercise. Something latest for a small fee, strike price. Very roughly speaking, one option is otherwise equivalent to one share of stock in a company. Okay. For 8 months or 12 months cliff if you choose. Tipo, tu gauni tos options ir tam tikrų momentų, nu, tipo, gali nusipirkti už tam tikrą kainą, tipo, jeigu matai, kad, I guess, įmonės kaina, nu, pakilo ar panašiai tenais. You get a 148 option package every month, except the first year is a probation period. You can part owner of the company only if you manage to stay at least 1 year. Why? Because the company doesn't want to give equity to performance or business leave in a few months. Okay, tai sumažintų tada tas galimybės, nu, tipo, kur kas 2 savaitės pasikeičia žmonės, I guess. Okay. O kur apie Lietuvą čia rašo? Okay, startup stock returns look nothing like that. For you, early stage startup stock returns fall into 2 possible scenarios. Worth nothing, typical outcome. Worth a lot, rare but life-changing if it happens. It's not hopeless, but I want to clear the wrong intuition conveyed by the overlaid word stock here. Tipo, didžioji dauguma startupų, nu, nieko ten nepadaro ir nepasiekia galų gale, tai daugiausiai ir būna typical outcome, kad tipo worth nothing. Remainder is split among founders and employees, and with mediocre outcomes, the remainder is often 0. Okay. Gerai, aš čia jau matematikos skaityti nenoriu. Čia nieko apie Lietuvą nerašė. O čia dahuja teksto. O tai man įdomu buvo, kai tu pasakei, Lietuvoje kai kurie bando daryti iškreiptą statupą į vizį, bet dabartiniams specialistus sunku būtų, manau, be optionų prisiliuoti, bet čia niekur apie Lietuvą nerašo. Apie Estiją šiek tiek rašo, bet čia niekur nerašo, kad Lietuvoje startupuose dabar visi optionus čia gauna ar dar kažką, tuo labiau. Čia apie startupus rašo. Nu jo, bet čia parašė, kad jo, kai kurie siūlo startupus, tai yra optionus. Jo, bet aš žinau, kad kai kurie siūlo optionus. Sakau, kad labai retai Lietuvoje čia iš vis, man atrodo, nu ir labai retas, kada startupas ir tol buvo labai retas darbuotojas, kuris gautų. Tai, jo, čia viskas, ką aš daugmaž žinau, I guess, paskaitėm.
And bye-bye, you weren't a human to us in the first place. You know, conservatives love to talk about community. They love to talk about family values. But who are the people that spend time with...
Ir šiaip ir ne tik Lietuvoje, turbūt labai priklausys nuo startupo, dar sakau, ir darbuotojų, kaip ir sakiau originaliai. Tipo, jeigu... sakau, 9% startupų. Jie ima darbuotojus, va tokius kaip aš realiai ar panašiai, kur tenais tu niekad net nebūsi suinteresuotas, kad ir aš ten daugiau metų buvau, ar ten reikalingas, bet tai netaip veikia, nu, jiems nereikės neįtikėtinų kažkokių ekspertų tipo, nes jo, jeigu jie visus ekspertus pasimtų ir duotų jiems optionų, gal ir pavyktų tas startupas tipo, gal ir būtų actually gerai, bet sakau, tai yra gal nefeilintų tas startupas, bet sakau, 99% startupų actually feilina. Ir nes taip ir yra, nes visiems pochui, tipo, niekam ten labai nerūpi, ar čia, nu, nefeilins, ar įgyvendins kažką. Jeigu procesas turėtų jo, bet kadangi va tokie startupai yra, tai ten, manau, jiems ir nelabai rūpi specialistus prisitraukti, ten, kad optionus duotų, ten ar klausimas, kokius jie turėtų, net jeigu norėtum pasamdyti, tipo, labai gerą kažkokį specialistą, ką turėtum praeiti, kad ten įkalbytum, savo tuos investitorius, kad jom reikia specialisto, kuriam turėsim duoti optionus, taip, I don't know. Who cares?
Their family and community
That's
the
like a
most.
labai
It's
retas
boomers
dalykas.
who are either retired or who have been grandfathered into well-paying job positions that allow them to have a life outside work. The only people in communities organizing craft fairs, barbecues, cooking associations, knitting clubs, etc., it's all boomers. The younger generation no longer have any time or capacity to get together and get to know their community, let alone be the ones setting these things up. Most of them don't even know how they're going to afford a home or pay off their loans. This sort of culture is completely soul-destroying and indefensible. Is government and democratic policies and inflation causing a lot of these problems? Yes, absolutely, they are. But it doesn't really matter who or what is causing the problems at this point, because it doesn't change the fact that too many conservatives have ceded the image of caring about workers to the left. It's the Labour Party saying, let's have a 4-day work week. It's The Guardian writing articles criticizing the 9-to-5. It's massive anti-capitalist Reddit pages like Anti-Work uniting people in their frustrations with the current work world. Yes, their solutions are terrible and stupid, but there's a reason so many people are gravitating towards a group that they feel are finally talking about this. Conservatives have so many solutions they could be putting forward in this arena, but too many seem unwilling to admit that maybe, just maybe, Zoomers and other young generations' apathy towards work is not just because they're a bunch of lazy, spoiled, entitled progressive brats, but because work is not the same as it used to be at all. We're dealing with...
Tas tikrai true. Mes kai gaminam startupą ir gavom pirmą injekciją, main founderiai pasikėlė algas, nusipirko telefonų, o developeriai tipo sako, arki tai pasinevilio prisprogštų. Good, fuck these people, what the fuck?
With an entirely different beast. One that you used to wrestle with to buy a home and support your family, but now it just eats you and your will to live. You get rare exceptions, but the vast majority of normal people do not see anyone on the right talking about their crushing work conditions. Instead, you have pundits ranting and raving at millennials and Zoomers to just stop eating so much avocado toast and drinking coffee so they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps just like they did and buy a house. Yeah, I'm sure that extra $7.99 a month will get a mortgage on that now $4 million house in the neighborhood you grew up in. Oh, is that you conservatives saying that if millennials want a home, they should move to the middle of nowhere? This is a self-report. I have said this before. But the more I've thought about it, I don't think it's a very conservative suggestion to abandon your friends, elderly family, and community you grew up in to be taken over by wealthy immigrants. Conservatives, and certainly conservative politicians, need to be going way harder on their opposition to mass foreign ownership. They need to be going way harder on limiting immigration to rates that don't exceed housing demand. They need to be going way harder on reducing restrictions on building instead of just telling people to move out of the cities, because the cities are where some people's entire lives are. And no conservative should ever be responding to young working people jilted by the current environment by rejecting the struggle they are in right now and being dismissive. Every generation is forced to contend with older generations telling them that their problems just aren't as bad as theirs were, and they really just need to suck it up. But the truth is, it's not really that one or the other's problems are better or worse. They're just different problems. Yes, as millennials and Zoomers, we have iPhones, we have Amazon Prime, Netflix, and safer sanitized working environments. But conservatives more than anyone should know these things are not what brings purpose and happiness to one's life. Owning your own property, feeling appreciated at your work, being able to support your family. These are all things younger people desperately desire but do not experience. And perhaps the spiritual crisis of younger generations isn't as obvious on the surface level as the struggle of working in a coal mine 40 years ago may be, but it doesn't make the problem any less of a problem. If anything, a spiritual crisis should be more important than a physical one to the right. And beyond all this, there is one last horror I have to highlight that I don't think anyone in politics considers enough. Let's put on our tinfoil hats all together for a second.
No.
Why would so many government or subsidized jobs want you working for 8 hours when you could finish them in 2? Why are so many jobs in general coming comfortable with your pay packet holding so
Ne,
little
nežiūrėjau.
value.
Kas
Making
gero buvo?
$100K in many cities might as well be minimum wage these days. Rental and food prices are through the roof. People have massive amounts of debt after getting that new car, that mortgage, that 4-bedroom family home. Fun fact, it used to just be a normal recommendation
Yeah,
of
okay.
older generations to hold 6 months' salary in their bank accounts just in case. This suggestion would be laughable for younger generations because today, personal debt is skyrocketing. Household debt in America stood at almost $14 trillion in 2015, mostly driven by mortgages. Instead of paying off our house by working a few years, we have to pass it on to our children. And in 2009, debt per capita hit 100% of income per capita for the first time since the Second World War. Savings? Really? Any extra income we have is going to paying off all the money that we owe. It used to be normal for people who work 8 hours to be some of the hardest workers in our society, right? We're talking legal limit for what companies can do. But now the normal workday ends at 9 p.m. if you're lucky. With the advent of greater mobile technology, even when you leave the office, work isn't over. Emails and phone calls keep you in the loop well after hours.
Jo, tas iš tikro irgi. Jeigu tavo darbo valandos yra darbo valandos, aš tiek pažįstu draugų ir pats, tarkim, susidūriau, bet, mano darbas toks biškai kitoks, galbūt, tai, tipo, pohui, bet realiai mažai kas gerbia darbo valandas, tipo, ar tavo atostogas, arba kai tau laisva. Kiek draugų esu turėjęs, kur ten eini pasivaišyti per jų laisvą dieną ar kažką, visą laiką iš darbo parašys, paskambins kažko paklaus, ar kažką reikės. Tipo, tu niekad mintyse nepalieki to darbo dabar, su ta technologija, tipo.
And hey, you got that big project coming up, you'd better work on the weekend too and get it all done. It's even worse since the pandemic. The working from home revolution was, in my mind, inevitable, but the lockdowns accelerated it into being. The combination of the home with the office just completely crushed the sacred delineation of the primary two aspects of life, ensuring that while we could turn up to meetings in a housecoat, we also had no escape from corporate demands.
Jo, aš startupe dirbu, tai jeigu aš nepadarysiu, nieks nepadarys, tipo, bet aš turėjau labai, mano darbas buvo tobulas tos. Savo laiku, savo tempu, tipo, vapšien, tipo, jie. Bet jo, aš nekalbu gal apie tokį, aš kalbu labiau, kur, tipo, grinai, aš nežinau, aš turiu panas pagrindę draugės ir jos pagrindę tom skundžias. Gal čia panas tiesiog išnaudoja, nes jos nesugeba ten, normaliai pasakyti, kad, fuck off, blėt, ar, už save pastovėti iš tos vietos, tipo. Nes, tipo, jeigu tu nedirbi, tau negali būti jokio fucking skambučio, pašol tu nahui, blė, what the fuck. Tipo, I don't know, niekad aš neapsikeščiau, net jeigu dirbčiau, tipo, bet aš sakau, aš esu labai netinkamas darbui apskritai tokiam. Todėl įgėsiu visą gyvenimą ir stengiausi niekad nedirbti tokio. Nes man paskambintų laisvadienį ir pasakyti, kad aš turiu dirbti ar kažką padaryti. Nesvarbu, kas skambina. Pasiunčiu nahui tiesiog. What the fuck? Ir tada mane atleidžia, aišku, bet sakau, todėl aš netinkamas tokiam. So there's no fucking way, kad aš daryčiau kažką. Jeigu paprašytų ir sumokėtų ir aš planų neturėčiau, tipo, kažkokią krizę, sure, aš suprantu. Bet ten joms kaip skambinėja, ten... Vapšė ne mano problema, what the fuck? Palauks, kol aš darbe būsiu, ką tu tik benorėtum ten. Bet čia labai nuo žmogus priklauso. Aš išjungiu penktadienį ir prisimenu tik pirmadienį ryte. Tas eigas irgi true, kad tu ar pats galvosi turbūt jo turbūt true. Nes jo aš kažkaip depends. Nes jeigu man būdavo, pavyzdžiui, matai, aš dirbau, sakau vėlgi, aš labai, aš nelabai standartinį, tarkim, darbą dirbau. Aš tam su startupe, kai dirbau, aš dariau tą, kas man labai patinka, tipo, tai jeigu kažkokią shit taską reikia padaryti, ten random suvedinėti apie čiampus kažką, tai tas neįdomus, apie tą negalvosiu. Bet jeigu koks projektas ten, kur reikia kažką padaryti labai įdomaus, tai man actually įdomu, tai aš ten esu ir daugiau valandų skirdavau, nes man įdomu būdavo. Tai ten netgi, tipo, techniškai darbo valandos baigės. Bet matai, mano darbo valandos techniškai buvo tos nuo 2 iki 6-4. Plat, teisingai pasakiau? Jo, nuo 2 iki 6. Bet aš kada noriu, tipo, galėdavau ten dirbti. Man tom valandom ten svarbu, kad jeigu kas paskambintų, ten, tipo, kad būčiau available, jeigu kas klausimų turi. Bet realiai aš patį tą savo darbą galiu atlikti, bet kada, svarbu atlikti. Tai, tipo... tai būdavo, kad aš ten dienom galvoju apie tam tikrą, kaip geriau padaryti, nes man tas labai įdomu būdavo, kaip įgyvendinti. Nu, bet čia biškai kitaip, sakau, čia nestandartinis toks darbas, kur ten random dirbsi korporacijai, kur tavo apšieniai pochuja, ten arba ten kokiam, nežinau, padavėja dirbi ir ten skyrius kokia ten, vadovė ir tau skambinėja savaitgalį ir ten random dieną, kai tu net nedirbi, kad paklaustų ten kokio klausimo ar kažką, tebe vis įtraukia. Ir suprantu, ten minutę atsakyti klausimą neužima daug laiko, bet still, actually, aš skaičiau, kad nemirė. Aš skaičiau, 5 minutės aš skaičiau, kad ją paėmė, nes jie ten buvo, okei, 4 minutės ago. Nes ją paėmė daktarai dėl jos ten sveikatos, viską mačiau prieš, ir jo, kiek ten, 96, 97, kiek jai fucking metų? 96, Jesus fucking Christ. Well, I do not care. Could not care less. Man ant tiek nerūpi, blėt, Anglijos karalienė. I do not fucking care. Anyway. Blėt, dažiūrėsim tą video. Šiaip jo tiesa dėl panų pažįstamų direktorius aš nedarbo valandom tas oficialų laišką parašė, kad taip daryti negali, tai dabar jokio trukdžio ir algą dar pakėlė. Ir sako, rašo dabar bendradarbiai. Lai padeda, kai turi 2 atskirus telefonus, vienas darbus, kitas asmeninis, jei sumaišai, tada viskas. Nesugebėsi atsispirt, pagundai, paskatyti laiškelį, kokį kur kolega naktį kažkodėl atsiūs. Okay, dabaigiam video.
For those of us lucky enough to have a home office, you can still maintain some physical level of separation, but for many ordinary people, the lack of a space dedicated for work further cements the ties of their job to their home. And you know what happens when their work becomes their life, when they're terrified of losing their job, when their job demands all their time, all their thoughts, and when they have no savings and no flexibility? They have no power. If people wanted to protest 50 years ago, they could. Why? Because they had savings put away. They actually owned their home. They owned their car. They didn't have $90,000 in debt like the average American household today. They could take a month off to strike. They could let the corporations or the governments know they're not going to put up with their behavior. And there's nothing they could do to make them bend their knee because their friends, their family, their community, who they work side by side with and also have the ability to not be worried about starving to death or defaulting on rent for months and months at a time, would be there with them, side by...
Ir žinot, šitą temą kalbant, aš kažkada galvoju ir gal ir dabar galvoju, kad, norėčiau, kad, žmonės turėtų daugiau laisvės. Kad nereiktų dirbti, nes daug žmonių galėtų dirbti daug mažiau ir atlikti tą patį darbą realiai, kad turėtų daugiau laisvo laiko. Tokia utopija, tokį pasaulį galim pakurti, ne mintyse, kad, būtų gerai, bet tada aš galvoju, ar tikrai būtų gerai? Nes, jau dabar, kai žmonėm tu duodi laisvo laiko, ne visi išnaudoja domėtis apie tai, kaip, uranium dikeina, ar ten enrichment procesą, ar Wikipedia skaityti, ar kažką ten. Daug visai jų iš to neturėjimo ką veikti, išprotėję, patampa aktyvistai vienos ar kitos ideologijos ir tiesiog velniop nueina visuomenė vos ne. Tai ar tikrai kai kurie iš vis iš proto eina, nes neranda savo tikslo jokio, jie žudbūt turi dirbti ten vos ne, kitaip jie neturės ką veikti ir išprotės ten, tai aš net nežinau iš tikrųjų. Bet turbūt galimybę turėti laisvo laiko daugiau pasinaudotų visi. Ir tie, kuriem žudbūt reikia darbo, ir tie, kurie nesusiras ką veikti be jo, ir tiesiog, I don't know, jau patiems žmonėm, man sunku būtų spręs, nes aš nenoriu nieką dirbti, bet aš visą laiką galiu užsiimti ir aš turiu ką užsiimti ir labai įdomu man yra tie dalykai. Bet aš pažįstu tiek daug žmonių, kuriem jie gautų ekstra 3 valandas į dieną. Aš nemanau, kad jie net panaudotų ir iš vis turėtų ką veikti, tiesiog nieko neveiktų tas 3 valandas. I don't know, Gerai, nesvarbu, žiūrim
by
dabar tą
side,
videą.
not trying to cancel them on Twitter from states and states away. And they could withstand, they could keep up these protests
Gertų,
for
blet,
long
arba
enough
savo
that
žmoną
corporations
muštų,
and
žinai, I
governments
don't know.
would give a damn about what they were upset about. Some of the largest political changes in history have been entirely because of worker union strikes. For many, even if you do decide, screw it to my work, screw it to my mortgage, I'm going to go to Ottawa with my truck and protest, the government just don't even seem to care about people's basic rights anymore. And unfortunately, I think all of this is by design. No one will stick their neck out because they're all owned. If you have debt, you can't afford to lose your job. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't afford to criticize or protest your company. If you're supporting a family, a mortgage, and a life, you can't afford to go to your town hall at 2 p.m., confront the teacher's board about the garbage being put in your kids' textbooks because you've got meetings until 8 p.m. first thing the next morning. This is an intolerable situation, but far too many in the political class seem far too preoccupied with licking the corporate and government boot to realize this. Yes, of course you should work, but you know what's more important than giving your life to some nameless, faceless corporation owned by Jeff Bezos? Giving your time and efforts to your community, building bridges on hiking paths, doing a food drive for the homeless, picking berries with your kids and making pies with it for community barbecues, fixing your elderly neighbor's fence, volunteering at the old folks' home, all these things that used to be normal before work became our lives. When we think about the Protestant work ethic, that's the work that Christ was talking about, not making sure you get 7,000 spam email advertisements for some bullshit beauty product out to your Indian customer base you don't even speak the same language as before your 6 p.m. deadline. I don't necessarily purport to have solutions to all of this. This video is more so a wake-up call for a crisis I think conservatives should be addressing more often. Because the left are right when they say that our work culture is toxic and soul-destroying. I'm not saying they have the right answers. Lord knows gulags are far more soul-destroying than a 9-to-5 at Starbucks, although you might get shot at both. But my point is that conservatives need to start taking this seriously. We need to start understanding why younger generations are so apathetic towards work, why they just don't seem to care to have the same drive to contribute to society as those who came before them. We need to start taking the fact that workers are not being treated properly, are not being compensated properly, and their concerns do not make them leftists or communists seriously. We need to listen because these are people's entire lives we're talking about. It's not one little problem. It's not some culture war bullshit. You know, work is where people are spending their entire days, the majority of their waking hours. And if conservatives refuse to acknowledge the torment that has become the average person's workday, then we will never win them over. So I hope to God we can manage that. And I appreciate you all for watching this video. I'm sure there'll be an interesting comment section. I will see you all there.